And you know what? Yes, he has some flaws, right? Like, okay, he's done some murder, but like
Yeah.
he's better now.
Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm Gabe, and
And
we're
we're
the Ghouls Next
Next
Door,
Door.
and you, our listener. We are the media literacy show from Horror Lens, where we explore the real life historical and psychological reasonings behind our cinematic fears. And we are talking about tainted love. That is our series. And today we are discussing everybody's favorite weirdo stalker boy. We're talking about you.
It's a love story, Gabe. No.
It
No, it's not.
absolutely is
It
not.
absolutely is not.
I'm sorry, you dropped all these red flags. So, yeah.
Yeah. You're picking them up. Or no,
Yeah.
you don't pick them up because they're a red flag, and that's when
There's
you
so
walk
many.
away.
Yeah.
No.
You gotta leave with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about you, but specifically season 3. We're skipping season 2. We covered the first season of the show back in years ago.
Before time.
It was pre-video times. I think it was 2018, and it was in our Romance Gone Wrong series, and we were talking about stalkers.
Mm-hmm.
And what better way to talk about them than with someone like Joe, who, embodies all the narratives that are wrong with stalkers, in that, like, he represents that person who's like, I know what's best for you. I know you better than anyone else, even though you do not know me at all.
Yeah. And
And
like he like doesn't know
no.
anybody at all. And that's like part of the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
his whole thing is he doesn't understand other people, but he thinks he does. And
Oh,
that's his
yeah.
whole issue.
It's
If he
not
was
just,
just like, I don't know everything, I am a white man, but I don't know everything, then he would be fine. Or
yeah.
at least a little better. I don't know, fine. But
And it like goes past that, because it's not so much like I know people. It's like I know better. Like I know the
Mhm.
best. Like I am the authority on everything about you.
Yeah.
And that's crazy, because it's like you've never talked to this human being, and
Ever.
just because you're like lurking in the shadows and you know what they do when no one else is watching doesn't mean you know them. But it's also like he was
Yeah.
like the nice guy trope, right? Like where he's, I'm a good guy, even though he's very much not, but he
Yeah.
thinks he's the world.
Hmm.
Right? Like you should be happy to have him. And you know what? Yes, he has some flaws, right? Like, okay, he's done some murder, but like
Yeah.
he's better now.
Yeah. He's
So
trying, so
yeah, and
it's totally chill.
he's gonna love you more than anyone else ever could.
I mean, who else can say that their person murdered someone for them?
Hopefully not too many people.
Yeah, I would imagine. I'm just saying, it's pretty crazy. Like, this is really ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
But
But he
that's
also,
his whole appeal in his mind. He's like, you
yeah,
know what? Who else is gonna love you that much
yeah.
to
Like
murder your
I'll be strong
neighbor?
for you.
Yeah,
That kind
exactly.
of thing. And I think it's
Wild.
also the other problem is, and I'll definitely talk about it in my section, is also the fascination with him, because there's also like a lore or a false narrative that all women secretly want to be stalked, right? Like, because it comes with
That's
this
an
idea of
incel.
like, yeah, right. It's very much like, oh, because you're getting some type of attention, right? Like you're special,
Mhm.
and that's really what he like works off of, is like, you're so special, like you should be honored that I'm taking the time to do this. And he embodies what someone would think a stalker is like, and that like all the girls are like simp for him. Like the problematic girlies who simp for him
Mhm.
are the same people who like you've never had a stalker, like you've never had someone who made you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in your environment, or like that your security is at risk in there's no privacy. Like there's so many
Yeah.
levels to what a stalker does to you psychologically, which we covered in that episode. Because I know people who've had stalkers. I've definitely had people who borderline that, nothing like super scary, but I've definitely had like my interactions where I'm like, oh,
Oh,
I
that's a
don't,
red flag.
you cannot be knowing
Ooh.
where I live. You know, we no, we got to have boundaries because this is going
Yeah.
to get rough. Like I've had to hide, you know, like that, those
Yeah.
things has happened. And anyone who's like, and it's also hard because if a stalker is just stalking, right? Like there's no crime really that's happened. Like Joe definitely does crimes. Like he
Mhm.
breaks and enters, he steals stuff, he kills
Yeah.
people. Like there's a
Yeah.
whole number of things. There's all kinds of crimes he does, but just the stalking isn't a crime. So even though it's encroaching on your safety and your like sense of just like at ease in your own home and in your own skin,
Yeah.
that's not enough for like authorities to warrant anything.
Which is so wild. Yeah. I mean, it's like a really deep, terrifying thing to like, because the whole thing is like, even when they're not watching, you don't know they're not watching. So you still feel anxious that they could be watching. And it really just destroys your entire like sense of safety. So yeah, it's a messed up thing. It's a messed up thing. Joe's a problem.
Joe's a
Um,
problem.
yeah.
And I think my favorite thing is that Joe is so much a problem that people fangirl over him, but Penn Badgley, who plays him,
Oh, does not. He
it
like
can't stand
shuts it
him.
down. Yeah.
He's like, no, no. Like he thinks it's absolutely disgusting that anyone would idolize this character. Like he's like almost the level of like Robert Pattinson and his loathing for the Twilight series, where
Oh,
it's just
okay.
like, I am stuck doing this role now because I like sent Kat a clip of him just totally roasting the show and complaining about Joe, and like, and one of the clips is just him like, we're gonna come back for season 4, you just wait, and we're gonna be saying the same things about how he's just a guy in love, and he's just like, this is a problem, and we're gonna see a season 4. So he definitely predicted it, um
Yeah.
sadly.
I mean, it's because it's like an interesting show, like objectively, like it is an interesting show, and also like the acting is really good. So it's just like that's something that really hooked me with it. Not with Joe. I don't. I think he's an entire problem, but all the characters are like super interesting in that like they're complex. They all got like crazy backstories going on. They all got like very much like emotional stuff happening. And then like it's also like that suspense building that you get with like those kinds of like mystery shows at the same time. Or like even it's like adjacent to true crime. So it hooks all the people who are also like kind of into that realm as well. Cause it's like very realistic in that like he's just a regular dude murdering
Average
people.
Joe. He's an
Average
average
Joe
Joe.
just going around murdering people. And it's just like you you would see him on the street and be like, look at that guy. He's a normal dude. Look at him be there. And then he's out, he has people in his basement, you know? And
Hmm.
that's what the show does really well because that's what actually happens with serial killers is that most of the time you
Regular
just
guy.
think they're a guy.
They're a
Or
family
no, there's
guy.
a person. There's the person, and you're like, wow, look at that regular person. And
Hmm.
then they got people in their basement, they've stalking, murdering, kidnapping, whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's what you should know because that's who you should be fearing. Everybody. Nobody is
Hmm.
safe. It's a zombie apocalypse all the time, except some people are good at hiding their stuff.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like Joe really fancies himself like the epitome of man, but he's so incredibly average. Like Joe, the character, is so regular, right? Like he like doesn't do a lot to enhance the way that he looks. Like he really is just a right. Like there is
He just
even
wears t-shirts.
commentary,
Yeah.
yeah. But there's even just commentary like in season 3 where there's like these muscular men who like don't eat carbs and they work out crazy and they do all this stuff and they just they're like jealous because they're like, oh, you just have a, yeah, that he has
Gotcha.
like, they're like, oh, you're just blessed with a high metabolism and you're just, like you don't have to do anything because it's not like he's working out. Like he jogs in season 2 and he's like gonna die because he's like, I
Yeah.
can't believe anyone does this.
His workout is the murders, you got to lift the bodies, you got to use the strength to do the murdering times.
Yeah,
That's his entire workout. He does not do anything.
exactly. So it's just like he really doesn't even try to like do anything like really insane to make himself this like alpha male that he sees himself as being, and that just kind of
Mhm.
adds to like the normalcy of him that's very counterintuitive to how he sees himself. which
Yeah,
is perfect.
he's kind of bland, you know.
He's very
He
bland.
doesn't
He's
really have
so
hobbies.
boring
He doesn't really have interests other than stalking
in
people
the books.
and like assimilating to whatever identity that person has.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is his books. That's it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and then I remember Netflix released that like clip that was edited to remove his like when season 1 was going on and everyone was like thirsting after Joe. They released a clip and it was edited so that it didn't have his narration, and it was like Joe doesn't say words, like he never talks. Like so, there's all these scenes of him just like staring and then be like, or like, or he'd be like burrito or something like ridiculous because she'd ask him like what do you want for dinner, and then he's like thinking for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And like that's him because everything is in his head, and so it's just like you have this understanding of him because you get this like
You get
very
the yeah.
special view.
You get his voice in your brain. That's all it is.
Yeah,
Whereas if you had to actually interact with Joe, it would be the actual thing that
it'd
you
be so
said.
boring.
Yeah.
That's why
You'd
he's so
say so
upset.
few words.
The neighbor was like, should I bone the boring neighbor? And he's like, boring neighbor, I
Is
thought
that
we
what
were
you
in
thought
love.
of
It's like,
me?
no, that's exactly what you are. Like someone needed to tell you. Someone needed to bring you down so many pegs. Oh my god. Well, let me tell folks about it. So we're talking about You, specifically season 3, which came out in 2021. But the overall show is about a dangerously charming, intensely obsessive young man goes to extreme measures to insert himself into the lives of those he is transfixed by. And it's created the show by Sarah Gamble and Greg Berlatini, but it is based on the books, which I will also talk about, by Carolyn Kepnes, which are great. And if you like the show, you will love the books. Highly, highly recommend. It's such a good glimpse into Joe that you do not really get. Like
Oh,
you get
interesting.
kind of like I love it. Like he's awful. He's like the worst ever. But I love listening to Joe because he's so crazy.
Yeah.
He's so, like his insanity is like at an 11 in the books. It's so
Oh,
funny to be in there in his head, and you're like, Joe,
stop it. Why are you like
what
this?
is that? So
Yeah.
highly, highly recommend. So in season 3 of Netflix You, we find Joe married to love in a suburban hellscape with a newborn, because
Woo.
last season Joe nearly killed Love in a fit of rage after, well, she murdered his last love interest.
Yep.
So, beginnings to a wonderful relationship.
Yeah.
However, his murderous rage was cut short when Love informs him of her pregnancy. And after a quick marriage, the two begin their life of wedded bliss in Madre Linda. The first season was him lusting after Beck, killing
Yeah.
Peach Salinger. Season 2 was his introduction to Love and her twin brother 40, as the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, so this one we're like picking up, and he's now has to be committed, and it's a whole thing. But
Yeah.
not all is perfect in this cookie cutter little boxes town, as Joe and Love's relationship begins a sharp decline immediately.
Yeah.
Immediatamente. Turns out that staying together for a baby and because you know each other's murderous secrets isn't enough to keep a relationship afloat. Who knew?
Huh. Yeah. That's crazy.
What? And despite the idyllic suburb and the picturesque life, Joe is gonna Joe.
Yep.
And so he sets back into his toxic ways, setting his eyes on their married neighbor, Natalie. And while Joe slips into old habits, Love, aware of his fascinations,
Uh-huh.
takes matters into her own hands to preserve their marriage. And it just spirals from there.
Yep.
It is so fun. And so, what we get this season is a whole lot of toxicity and murder.
Yeah.
Love murders because Joe isn't attracted to her. And as she explains, screaming in the rain while trying to bury a body that she murdered. If you're not attracted to me, you may kill me. Like she just lays it into him, which
Yeah.
is super true. Like she is very honest. Like she even at one point is like, "You were about to kill me. I told you I was pregnant. Now we're married and we're living in Madre Linda. Like I'm not an idiot. Like
Yeah.
you wanted to murder." He's like, "That was before."
Yeah.
Like, we have a baby now. I'm better. I'm better now.
And also, like, the guy who plays Joy, I always forget his name every time.
And
Ken, yeah, he even said in that video he sent me, he's like, he doesn't murder her because she's having a baby, but like, why is that life worth more than hers? And it's because he has ownership over that baby. He
yeah.
feels like this is like his. So
Yeah.
like that's the only reason he spares her. And she knows that. And that's why it's like, oh God. Y'all
Yeah.
should just amicably leave each other or something. Or just turn each other
A
in. I
conscious
don't know.
uncoupling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super. She's very aware of how
Yeah.
little she means to him, and like even when they're in couples therapy, just this like him admitting like he was going to leave. Like she knows very well that the only reason that he's in this relationship is for Henry, their baby, and he doesn't love her, and that's like a big issue. I
Yeah.
think even with him being as like crazy as he is, if he loved her, they wouldn't have had a problem.
Yeah.
And the only reason he doesn't love her is because he sees her as a full person. I'll get there.
Yeah.
Because now he sees that she's got more going on, you know?
Yeah. She's
Ugh,
not an idea. She's an actual human.
what?
How dare.
Uh, so Joe continues his lustful ways, stalking new victims despite his wife's new murderous defense mechanisms. And even their therapist is alarmed by their complicated relationship, though she insists that they are many things, but neither of them are murderers.
Of course
He
not.
said to two murderers. It's so this season is so funny. Like
Yeah, the
everything
writing
is
was
like
good.
a joke, and you're like, yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's silly.
Yeah.
In an article on Washington Post titled "You Season 3 is its best yet, thanks to its true horrors, marriage in suburbia," writer Inku Kang explains how well Joe and Love fit into their new neighborhood, one full of villains just like them, only with less murder. And they say, but as much as Joe hates the suburbs, feeling like a predator forced to cage itself, it's an unexpectedly fitting habitat for him. He's surrounded by inveterate liars and chronic pretenders just like him, like mommy
Mhm.
influencer Sherry or TV journalist Ryan, whose sobriety story is just too good to be true. Joe and Love may roll their eyes at the private school strategizing and self optimization tips that are supposed to pass for conversation in their town, but in the end, the couple spend all their time putting on a happy front just like everybody else.
Yep.
It really like forces him to have to like do what he's always saying he can do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
He has to adapt and it's hard for him.
like past like the honeymoon stages. Like
Yeah.
that's where he gets messy because then he's like,
Yeah.
oh, we have to be real.
Yeah.
But as I said, what I really loved about the season was the humor. That's why I think it's the best season. And I found seasons 1 and 2 funny for sure,
Yeah.
and a great introduction to a complicated character like Joe. But season 3 is hilarious and even better, self-aware. And so the season spins classic wedded woes into something more sinister. It sees a husband's complaint of his wife's crazy personality and raises it with literal murder. It sees a wife's worries at her husband's infidelity and raises it with the threat of her own death. Their complaints about their partners mirror real life woes, and only they in the audience know the heaviness behind those lines. And when Joe fantasizes about running off with Henry because love is dangerous, he concedes that Henry needs a mom. It's a playful mix of reality and the absurd with each episode. Placed against the backdrop of suburbia, they could be mistaken for any desperate couple stuck together for the sake of their child's future. The
Mhm.
way that, if they told you the way that they were seeing it, it sounds regular, you know, because
Yeah.
he's just like, she's crazy. She's just murdering all over. And then he's like, okay, the best way to dispose of this body is. She's like,
Yeah.
why do you know that? You're crazy. And I'm like, y'all,
Y'all
you
are
need to just
both
you need to turn and look at this
crazy.
mirror right quick. It's so
Yeah.
funny. Every time he's just like, okay, yeah, I'm bad, but
It's the
um,
worst. Yeah.
Henry can't be around that. And then he's like, yeah, I remember when I killed Pete Salinger. Like,
Yeah.
what are you
No,
doing
it's
with
really
that?
ridiculous.
It's so funny. Um, Because Joe believes himself the answer to all problems, knowing exactly the kind of man a woman wants. He molds himself to fit what his new you needs, or what he thinks they would want. And it is when they reveal themselves to be more than the two dimensional perfect beings whose personalities he has filled in for them, then he loses interest,
Mhm.
snaps, and murders them, and the
Yep.
people around them, and anyone who would hold him accountable.
Yep.
In Madre Linda, his assumptions have evolved from that of simply what a woman wants to the idyllic husband archetype he strives to be. And when love shows herself to be less than or other than the wife he believes wives should be, he is ready to throw her away.
Mhm.
And she is not wrong to worry. She is, however, wrong to murder about it.
Yeah.
So she is not innocent, okay? She is
Oh,
just,
no, no, no. Yeah, she
yeah,
catches more bodies than Joe in this episode, or this season.
she
It's like
does.
she's A for effort, she's really doing the extra mile
Joe and Joe.
for
It's funny because,
murder.
like, yeah, it really is. Like, I think if she didn't, like, I don't know if he would have eventually murdered Natalie, but he,
Yeah,
she's
she
just
sped it up. That's like, yeah, she made it go a lot quicker than it would have gone otherwise. Because otherwise, he would have done his whole stalking thing,
yeah,
and then she would have still ended up in the basement, but like in a different way.
yeah. Every I will say everyone that they catch this season is because of her,
Yeah,
because like even with Sherry and Carrie, it's because she's like, I murdered Natalie for you, and then they're like, oh. These people we're gonna have sex with, they're upstairs. I'll
yeah,
get there. That Washington Post article goes on to say his previous soliloquies revealed him to be an unhinged sociopath whose idea of love couldn't sustain a real relationship. Now his efforts to fall back in love with his wife expose him terrifyingly as one of us, because they do try, and that's what I
yeah,
found really interesting. Like whenever they're every part of their troubles feel very real and normal, and then it's
yeah,
just like with a little spice of murder in it. Because it's like, oh, I don't like, we just had a baby, we're not attracted to each other, we don't want to touch each other anymore, we are
yeah,
under stress, her brother just died, her mom sucks, he has never had a loving relationship in his entire life to like use
yeah,
as a like any type of help, and so both of them are a mess. It's totally valid to fall out
yeah,
of love or not know how to navigate love in very stressful situations like that, and then they just
yeah.
happen to deal with that with murder. um
Yeah, they needed more than just couples therapy. They needed other therapy too. They needed a lot of therapy
they
between the two
needed
of
jail,
them. They needed jail too. They had already murdered a bunch of people at this point.
but before,
But while they're in jail, and then before they even got to that point, therapy. Just
yes,
so much.
therapy, yeah. um the show, what I really loved is that like I said, the show is self-aware because it knows that it's absurd. It knows
Mhm.
people love Joe and they love love, and more than that, people love drama.
Yep.
And the show laughs at the petty squabbles of this clearly toxic, no good for each other couple, and instead shows us an annoying, surprisingly the most healthy couple instead, which I will talk about. The
Mhm.
irony is that Love and Joe at times make sense for each other. They are
Yeah.
just broken, awful, and messy humans who don't know how to communicate. The problem is that their love language is murder.
Yeah.
They haven't healed from their own traumas at all and are
Nope.
therefore in no place to give or receive love. And so Joe struggles with his troubled past full of abandonment, abuse, and murder, while Love struggles with the loss of her other half, which was her brother, a mysteriously dead husband, and a toxic marriage by her parents that left this imprint on her. And
She
they are
also
two.
murdered her nanny, just so you know.
Also murder, right? She's, and
Yeah,
then it's like her
they
her
both
dead
started
husband,
young. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she like even though she had parents, she didn't,
Yeah.
like it
No,
wasn't the same
100%.
that he had, but it was also pretty abusive and problematic, right?
Yeah.
She was also alone if she didn't have 40.
Yeah.
And they are just two people in need of a lot of support, understanding, and a mirror.
Yep.
They need a mirror and they need to look at it and say like, okay, you know what, hi, I'm the problem, it's me.
Yeah.
Like, 100%. So
Yeah.
the show gets real about the horrors and toxicity of the suburbs, tech junkies, and fitness trends, but it goes even further by stepping away from the problematic Joe and turning to look at the fans of the show, because critiquing the fans' fascination with the villain and his victims is very entertaining. In in episode 3 of the season, aptly named Missing White Woman Syndrome, love interest and best person in Madre Linda, Marion, played
Yep.
by Tati Gabrielle, love her, explains the phenomenon behind the obsession with missing women. She expresses an annoyance towards the underreported cases of missing women of color in the news and society. And it's a really great discussion. I've
Yeah.
mentioned it before on this show when we talked about Jacob's wife.
Hmm.
Right? Like it is a problem, right? But what I really enjoyed was that the Venn diagram of fans who watch you and those who love true crime is one circle. Just one circle. They're the same person.
Yeah.
This is the same picture, right? And romanticizing Joe is a problem. When we discussed in our first episode about the program, and even Netflix had to like tweet a bunch to tell people stop thirsting after him. He's a monster, and Penn as
Yeah.
well was
Yeah.
like, no, this is not what you want to do. Um, but targeting an upper class white woman with an affluent husband was a bad move for the couple, leaving them at a high risk of getting found out. But the risk is not new to Joe, who previously targeted Peach Salinger, who was an equally popular and cared for human and came from a very like famous family. And in the books, it's like really stressful. It's such a time when he's trying to clean up that mess because it
Yeah.
follows him. It's very good. But Marion's lesson isn't necessarily for Joe. It definitely, makes him think and he's already stressed. It's actually for us because we're fascinated with Joe's endless missing white women.
Yeah.
We are also contributing to the problem. Or just people who like fetishize, you
Oh
know?
yeah, who are like, I would let him kiss me. Like, no, don't let him kiss you. don't don't let him stalk you. It's not a good time. Like, it's not a fun time. Don't
Anybody
like him.
who is fantasizing about shoujo needs to read the books. I just need you to do that because I would
Yeah.
love to see someone try to reason that. I want someone to get in, like into his head, like open it up, you're in there, and be like, "Yep, yeah, this one's the winner." Because you're not. You're going to be like, "Who?
Oh god.
Whoa,
Yeah,
whoa."
exactly.
Um, one of the most surprising parts to me, and one of my favorite parts about the show actually, was the breakout couple, Sherry and Carrie. And at first glance, in our first interactions with the beautiful couple, they are superficial and problematic.
Yep.
Sherry is known to give snide digs at her friends, and more than a few troublesome moments with Love. In one scene, after Love is subjected to a number of veiled critiques about her physique, she responds, "Is it just me, or is everyone saying that I'm fat?" And this comes after she just had a baby and is
Yeah.
clearly uncomfortable in her new surroundings, murderous husband notwithstanding. Later, Sherry erupts into a rage after Love fed her twins cupcakes with fruit on them because even fruit has sugar. Um, and even worse is Sherry's framing of herself at the center of Natalie's missing case, propping herself up as her best friend and the only one who cares about her getting all this attention, right?
Yeah. And she like did not like her at
She
all.
did not like. They made Natalie a pariah the same way they were trying to do for Love,
Yeah.
right? And Carrie is toxic male energy made human. He is, as Joe describes him, Carrie sexual,
Yeah.
believing he knows the best way to exist. And as annoying as they are, truly terrible friends, awful friends, never. They are the most healthy couple on screen.
Yeah.
Like as a couple, they're it, right? They communicate with one another honestly. They never ask more of their partner, have no warped understanding or desire for their partner to be something else. They
Yeah.
accept them for who they are and they're like, okay, that is my partner in life.
Hmm.
We work with each other within our limits. We understand what those are and we adjust to them. We
Hmm.
make space for them, which is like, what? Which is so funny to have them. And then you have like Love and Joe, who
Hmm.
like don't even really want to touch each other.
Yeah. Unless they're covered in blood because they just murdered somebody.
Yeah, and then they're like really horny. And you're like,
Yeah.
your baby is upstairs.
Why are you like
Oh my god,
this?
just side note, there's like a part where they're like They're like, they have to bury the body. And so, like, Love goes to get the baby out of the car. And he's like, "You're going to bring him?" And she's like, "What? And leave a baby in a car?" It's like, is this the time that we're going to start judging each other about parenting? And she's like, "He's not going to remember anything."
Yeah.
Like, which is true, but it's like, turn him around.
Fun fact, when you're that young, that's actually the time when you're most sensitive to trauma.
Oh no, poor Henry. He
Like
got out just when he
developmentally, like
could.
it messes with your brain.
Yeah,
But it's okay. It's okay.
I mean, he was able to get out in a good way. He has a chance now.
Yeah, for sure. It was a better decision to have him end up somewhere else. I'm just saying.
He's rough.
He's gonna like flinch at stuff and not know why. And that's why.
Yeah, he's gonna have like something, when it rains, his stomach is gonna hurt,
Yeah,
and he's gonna be
something.
like, what
Why
is
I
that?
feel like this. This makes no
why
sense.
why is commitment really hard for me?
Yeah.
um but like that's why the season is so funny, because stuff like that would happen,
Hmm.
right? Like, ugh, like, leave him in the car, Joe.
Yeah.
um
Meanwhile,
Love
dead
it
person.
so much.
Ridiculous.
Um, when Carrie and Sherry invite Joe and Love into their bedroom, it is with the understanding that they are so strong and firm in their love for one another, adding others to the mix serves no threat. Meanwhile, Love is murdering people if Joe so much as looks at them too long.
Yep.
And after being kidnapped by the disastrous duo, the couple checks in with each other to get real and open, and through that, are able to survive. Um,
Yeah.
they were like, I love their little code system where she's
Yeah,
like,
right. Red
he's like,
light.
"I'm gonna bring us back down to a purple. I don't think you're being honest with me." And he's like, "No, you're right." And I was like, as cheesy as that is, because they are like the epitome of cheese, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're what you would groan if someone just you knew someone like this. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, maybe I need to start implementing code systems, because I feel like that's super true. Like, okay, hold on, if it's not now, I get it, but we're gonna have to unpack this because I'm
Yeah.
feeling something here.
Hmm.
And this is I'm a safe person. I'm not gonna take it personally because we're a team.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like what the therapist said in Joe and Love's couple session. Like, a relationship is work, and it is clear that Sherry and Carrie, as annoying as they are putting in that work, and that like they see each other for who they really are and love that person, and are like working hard to make sure that they like are happy together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even like it's a really small scene, but after that freak out with the cupcakes, like,
Hmm.
Carrie says to Joe, like, "Oh, just give it like a week. I'm gonna do this thing." I think he says, like, in the bedroom or something. He's gonna do this thing, and she's gonna forget all about it. And it's like he knows her, right? Like, he's like,
Hmm.
I get it. Super stressful. She's all right. Like, it's
Yeah.
gonna be fine. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, because he knows it's absurd. He knows it
Yeah.
was crazy, but he's also gonna stick by her side. As crazy
Yeah.
as that was, he didn't come back and say, like, "Isn't she crazy? Oh,
Yeah. No,
women,
no,
she's a
no. He
mess."
supported her, and he's like, she'll be okay in a week. It's
He's
fine.
like, "No, they can't have that sugar." That's it.
Yeah.
Um, so I also wanted to just briefly mention some parts about the books, because, like I said, they're one of my favorite books.
Hmm.
So I read the first two You novels by Carolyn Kepnes, and then Joe in the Books is an unhinged, disgusting predator that is in no way redeemable and is laughably absurd in his thoughts. The book Joe is the show Joe times 10, and exactly what actor Penn Badgley wants you to understand about the villain. He's like, read the books because now you get it.
Yeah.
The number of people who lust after this murderous creep is hilarious, and the only thing funnier than that is hearing Penn talk about it in
Yeah.
all of those like videos. So definitely look it up. But the thing about the book is that it spends the entire time in Joe's mind, and so we
Yeah.
get a front row glimpse into his twisted psyche. Yes, even more twisted than in the show. And Book Joe steals Beck's used tampon and masturbates outside her window in the bushes.
Uh,
It's like there are things I remember, and I was like, they didn't go like, they hint that he does some weird things, but in the book you're with him and you hear him
yeah, you can't like
reasoning.
go to a different character.
You
You're with
don't.
him
You
the
never
entire
know
time.
any of the other ones. He is not cute. like in any way. Um, and I am in no way defending Shoujo. He is also disgusting and a murderous monster, but we certainly get a glimpse into his thoughts in the show. But that's all we get in the books, right? We do not
Yeah.
get to hop over and see what this person's thinking. Like I really appreciated like there's like an episode where it's from Love's point of view where she was narrating
Hmm.
at the beginning, and I was like, that's dope. I was like, that's so
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
in the book, Joe's reasonings are an entire experience. His point of view, our only lens. And because of this, we only get very two dimensional, vapid, and annoying love. Book love is California superficial with nothing much underneath. Her relationship with Joe is also quite fleeting and not as interesting or charming as season 2 of the show made it out to be. I could not stand the book love, and that's because it was Joe's interpretation of what she was. I'm sure she was so much more, but
Yeah.
there's like a whole scene. I don't even remember if she. I don't think she did it. There's a scene in the book where, kind of like as a show of wealth, she fills up a bathtub with this really expensive champagne or something, and it's like balls.
Hmm.
It's like $30,000. Like it's
Oh my
absurd,
god.
disgusting.
Yeah.
He's like, and she's trying to be sexy and flirty and cute and use her money to have any type of affection, and he like comes in and he's so mad because he came from nothing, and he's like
Yeah.
disgusting, and he like doesn't want to touch her, and then it gets really harmful. um Very bad. Just trigger warnings, please look them up on Storygraph.
Okay.
Read. But it does get really really intense, and it's very clear that she's just like, this is what she's used to always
Yeah.
being this two-dimensional creature to people, and just being someone with money. And it's like that, there's just scenes that really stuck with me. She's very desperate, and she's definitely desperate in the show, but I feel like she's also a little stronger in the show. um,
Yeah.
is she also, I don't think she ever murdered in the book. I don't quote,
Oh, interesting.
don't quote me on that. She might have, but not like this. This stuff is
Yeah.
so. At least in book 2, right? In the show, there is a passion and fascination for love from Joe in the beginning, and also like late, like when I wolf you, like there, it's really cute,
Yeah.
and I feel like they would have worked if they weren't both murderers, right?
Hmm.
Um, but in the book, she represents a potential future, but is always at odds with his reality. And love is only an addition to what 40 is for Joe. I think 40 is more important to him in the book than
Okay.
love is, because 40 presents him with an opportunity to write a script, and they end up writing one together, and they're like spending nights together, and that's why he sticks around with love, and he's like, the best of both worlds. And then 40 screws him over and steals that script. And like he doesn't get any credit, and then Joe reconsiders his relationship with the two of them because they are a package deal. And so I felt like his relationship with 40 was more than his relationship with love.
Huh.
And Joe's thoughts are so drastically absurd, they leave no room for redemption or fantasizing, and I would audibly laugh out loud at some of the things he truly thought in the book. Um, and the show is also funny, but they missed out on some truly raucous lines, such as my favorite line that went something like, he got to experience my favorite place in the whole world. Loves vagina. And that's him referencing his child being born, just for context. Like
Okay.
that's him. Like that's how absurd. Like I was listening to it. It was an audiobook, and I was listening to it while I was doing laundry, and he said that line, and my partner was like, "What?" And I was like, "No, sorry, that's just Joe." It's
That's
like
just who he is. I don't
it's
know
such a
why.
run of the mill. It was such an absurd sentence. I like it is the funniest thing. Like you have like it's so funny. Again, check trigger warnings. But if you can get
Get
past
through
some of the
that. Yeah.
intensity and the murder and stuff. It's so funny. In Hidden Bodies, which is the second book, Joe's lies and tangled strands of dead bodies, secret identities, and hidden evidence pile up into an undeniable record of his villainy, and a lucky detective stumbles upon one discrepancy that unravels 2 books worth of deceit, resulting in Joe's arrest. Spoilers. Even in the face of the mountains of evidence, including photos of his face and his literal DNA, he laughs at the idea of being held accountable for his actions. He scoffs at the officer's attempts at making him feel guilty because, yes, he's killed before, but he's different now. He's a
Mhm.
father and therefore doesn't deserve to be held responsible for the actions of past Joe. Like, he literally is like, it is crazy of this guy to
Yeah.
like try to, okay, I'm gonna go to prison because I murdered before. I don't do that now. Like, that's
Yeah.
literally what he's
Consequences, a white
saying.
man has never understood those.
It's so
Uh,
funny.
yeah.
It's preposterous, but a truly Joe line of thinking that we see glimpses of in the show as he makes excuses for his redemption. Now that he is Henry, he'll be a better human, a better father, and further, a better husband. If
Mhm.
only his damned crazy wife wouldn't keep murdering people and leaving him to clean up the mess.
Yep. Of course. Yeah, if only. That's because that's the problem.
Yeah, it's all her. It's all her.
Yeah, he can't ever at any point ever in his life be held accountable for his
It's
actions. Of
so
course not.
funny.
And like I get how he got there. I'll talk about that. But it's like I haven't read the book, so I don't know if they even give you any of the backstory exposition that they give him in
No,
the
like,
show. Um,
I
but
don't remember any of that.
yeah. Well, yeah. So I guess yeah, they do humanize him more in the show. Then I can see why Penn had issues with that,
Mhm.
because
They
yeah,
give
then
him
you're like, oh, I
excuses.
feel bad for the like kid version of him. Maybe he didn't have to turn out this way, and it's like, well, you know what, he did though.
Mhm.
He made the choice, and look how bad his time has been. He's not a fun guy. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
It's definitely read. Just definitely read it. I can't tell you. I love it
now
so
I
much.
want to because I'm like
It's
interested to just
so
hear how
funny.
ridiculous it is.
So yeah, and also watch the show. I mean, I don't even feel like you need to watch the other ones. You will get the gist of who Joe is and who Love is, and just like you'll get a kick out of just how stupid their arguments are. Like
Yeah,
when they're complaining about each other, because that's my favorite part. And she's like,
yeah.
"You're crazy." And he's like, "You were literally cleaning up your murder, cleaning
You're
up a
like, "What
murder
do
you
you
did."
mean?" Yeah, then they fight about, like, mundane stuff while they're murdering, it's so bonkers.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the end, there is a bit of a twist at the end that's pretty fun, so once you get there, you're like, "Hmm, that was kinda cool."
yeah.
Uh, but I'm not gonna spoil it because it was fun to get to.
Toy.
At the end of the day, they weren't good for each other. Like, they seem like they are, but they're also just not.
No,
Um, but yeah, let
not
me
where they, not as the people that they were.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if they got help, maybe.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think if they actually like therapized and if Joe wasn't coming from where he was with already many murders under his belt,
Yeah.
uh maybe it would have been a different tale. I don't know. He also
Hmm.
probably wouldn't have ended up in California though.
Yeah. True.
But is what is. Yeah. But for my section, it's a lot less facts. It's not really a fact section, and more of a like. I didn't realize I would have such strong opinions about this show. section. It's an opinion based on logic and factual information more than it is actually about facts. So take it as you will. I'm just gonna like talk about what I thought.
You're allowed. You're allowed.
Yeah, every so often, gotta throw it in there. So in watching this show, there was so much to unpack. Like all the characters are so interesting, and I don't know what it was like in the book. I'm sure Joe might have been interesting there just through like an absurdity angle, but
Hmm.
like all the characters in the show was just they were like all complex. Even the ones like you didn't like, you like were like, huh, I see how we got here though. Like, it was interesting.
Hmm.
And they're all so deeply flawed. And these flaws make them authentic in ways I don't always see on TV. And that, like, I talk about like my like spidey sense in realizing like authentic like emotion and acting. Like
Hmm.
I always get
Hmm.
really uncomfortable when people don't know what they're doing. They're acting. And
Yeah.
this acting was some of the best I've ever seen. Like I believed these people who definitely aren't these people
Yeah.
were like these characters the
Yeah.
entire time. At no point was I doubting like that this I was watching a TV show. Or like I that it was the reverse. If anything, I was like, wow, I'm like watching this like crazy true crime unravel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. So this season in particular got me in my feelings multiple times, mostly in that it activated my own personal trauma and witnessing adults fail to protect children. But it's okay. And while I recognize trauma is never the child's fault, it was hard watching the children in the show, including young Joe, be harmed by the adults in their life. And it always gets me like even hearing like adults speak of their trauma when they were a kid. So it's like I'm happy I empathize with that, but I also don't simp for Joe, and I just want to make that abundantly clear.
Yes.
Because every time I do catch myself, like, oh, poor guy, uh, I immediately shift back and stop myself, and I'm like, no, we're not going to excuse his unacceptable actions, though. He is a
Mhm.
monster.
Yeah.
And one thing I've learned in my personal journey is that we can understand why something happens and at the same time not accept it. And
Mhm.
the flashbacks to Joe's childhood that we see in season 2 are further expanded in season 3, providing this like additional context for Joe as a character, which was pretty interesting. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
he is still a monster. And we do get some additional context for Love as well. And I do feel like by the end of it, I did leave that one episode where they did give her perspective, like wishing we kind of got more from her. I feel like they could do a spinoff of
Yeah,
her. Like she was just really interesting as a character.
I agree.
And like I would have liked to see more of her outside of just what Joe's perspective of who she
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
So yeah, Joe and Love unfortunately embody the phrase, our trauma is not our fault, but it is like our personal responsibility to heal from it if when we become adults.
Mhm.
And Love and Joe both refuse adamantly to do any healing work and actively make harmful choices. And we see this in the adults in their lives also as they like mimic that back to them. And Love's mother, in the flashbacks of Joe's mother and father, many adults in their lives, at least like while they were young, and in Love's instance, even when they're an adult, follow a similar pattern to Joe and Love in not healing from their own trauma and in their decisions causing active harm. And Joe perpetuates this in his own adulthood, but in a more extreme way, obviously, through the serial murders, stalking, and desperate attempts at control. And the characters of Love and Joe are hard to navigate because there is a complicated way of humanizing them that they do in the show. And I've seen like a lot of critiques for this, in that like you do have people like simping hard for probably both characters. I'm not gonna lie, and I do think that that's a problem. But I do think like humanizing them as characters does help in understanding that murderers aren't these fantastical monsters of pure evil. Most
Mhm.
times they have the ability to deceive and present themselves as nice people and even possibly see themselves that way. The inverse of the problem with it is that you do at times end up sympathizing with Joe and Love or even like rooting for their relationship in like brief moments where you're like when they're talking about like dumb stuff that has nothing to do with the murder they just committed. And the show itself skirts this line between exposing Joe as a monster and providing the audience with points of sympathy towards him. What is most important to recognize when looking at characters like Joe and Love is that they have a responsibility for their actions, even though they don't see that.
Mhm.
And while Joe's childhood actively impacted his perception of right and wrong, as well as his approaches to relationships and love, his choices and actions are what define him. In becoming a killer, he made a monstrous choice, something he had never at any point takes responsibility for.
No.
And the reality being that Love and Joe both murdered people in their journeys, and instead of taking responsibility for those actions, they searched to justify them. They need to justify their actions because it's all in a pursuit of maintaining this perception that they had good intentions and that their actions are necessary.
And that
And
it's
we do,
somebody else's fault too. Like it's
yeah,
always somebody
100%.
else.
And I mean, I will say, like in the flashbacks to Joe's mom that we get in the show, she does the same exact thing.
Mhm.
In
Mhm.
abandoning him, she's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I know this is awful, and like you're struggling, you're experiencing this trauma, but like sometimes you just got to start fresh, hun."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
she says that to this horribly traumatized child that she has straight up abandoned. So like,
Yeah.
if he learned it from anybody, it
Mhm.
was her. And I mean, the show, in many ways, in this fact that these are two white characters, shows this cultural belief that is present in white culture that to be good is inherent, when
Mhm.
in fact it is instead active decision making. Especially within white culture, being a good person is often totally separated from actual actions and choices, and instead is viewed as like a state of being, an instinct, or an intention. I mean, we see like our characters embody this in their time. They're like, I murdered, but like I had a good reason to murder. Or like
Mhm.
I murdered because like this person was doing this, and like I'm still like a good person. you
Yeah.
know? And many times throughout the show, an adult in Joe's life will tell him he's a good person or a good boy or a nice guy.
Mhm.
And these statements are fed to him at conflicting moments where he makes choices that 100% do not align with the ideal of goodness. After murdering his father in a scene in actually not the third season, but the second season, I believe, Joe tells his mother, or Joe's mother tells him something to the effect of like, "You're a good boy. You were just protecting me. You wouldn't do a bad thing on purpose because you are good," as he has just murdered his dad.
Mhm.
So, like, morality as a result for him is subjective to his surroundings and those he seeks approval from. Um, so that's just like my little psychoanalysis on Joe. What was especially interesting to me was watching Joe and Love adapt in their new environment in the very different ways, and how that stemmed from their unique personal histories. So, like, where Love was able to adapt and assimilate, Joe, like, honestly struggles in California.
Mhm.
And Love's benefit is that like she got to be raised in an upper class California environment. She has been socialized as a woman. She has learned to adapt in ways that Joe never has. She's also like been a socialite, you know. She
Mhm.
knows how to
Mhm.
fake it. She knows how to get along with everybody, and that acts like actually adds to her ability to manipulate and like blend in and get away with stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but we see Joe really struggle in society because he's used to blending in the background. He's used to not really having
Mhm.
to talk to people. He's used to like
He likes being
being
invisible.
his invisible stalkery time, and he doesn't get to do that in the suburbs of California.
Mhm.
And like Love picks up on social cues in ways that Joe will never notice the subtleties of, because he was socialized in the East Coast, which has a very different vibe. And he was also raised without money. So like all these things kind of connect and impact his ability to assimilate somewhere like rich place, California suburb. And we see Love's success in this with her relationship with Sherry and the other Loke girls, but she's like able to form connections with others in a way, even if kind of inauthentic and shallow, that like Joe doesn't have the capacity to do. She's able to blend in. And because Joe's not able to blend in, I think that is largely why like his usual methods aren't working. You know, we see like his like spiral, even like getting a lot of things wrong. Like he's always trying to interpret people's intentions and like messing it up, you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
he didn't really have that as much on the East Coast. And even when he first moved to California, you could see he was struggling, but like he was better at his job
Mhm.
on the East Coast than he is in California. And you can see him like struggling with this. And this can be seen specifically, what stood out to me was his like instinct with Marianne's ex,
Yeah.
and like failing to realize that he had noticed him. You know, he saw him at the AA meeting. He
Yeah.
he was faking his drug recovery. You know what I mean? Like he was doing
Yeah.
all this stuff, and he failed to realize all of that because his upper class California environment is one that like is so different, and it's also he's not used to having eyes on him, because in California suburbs, everyone is
Mhm.
watching you. They're looking at what your lawn looks
Everyone
like.
knows.
They're looking through your windows. They're doing the stalking back to you, and he's not used to that. And it almost gets him caught like multiple times, and it's invasive in a way right back towards him, in a similar way to how he invades other people's privacy. And I think that like he's not accustomed to. And I thought that was just like a really interesting like mirror back
Yeah.
to him that the
Mhm.
show did. That was really cool. I don't know if the book does it too. Does he go to California in the book, Gabe?
Yes. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
talk. I was gonna say in the book, it's so funny how, again, I keep saying how funny it is, but his complaints about California is hilarious. Like he is so loathsome for it, and he just groans about it. He hates how fake everyone is. And he even like he's like, I have to make friends. Like I have to get a social media account. I have to get Facebook friends, or it's weird. Like people are going to start thinking
Yeah.
you're really weird. And it does become a really big thing for him that he has to like assimilate in this way that he's not used to and start having like this paper trail, and be more like, or less of a wallflower than he's comfortable with. And it's such a
Yeah.
big thing for him. He hates California. It's very fun because for me, I was like, that's exactly how I feel sometimes if I interact with people from California. Like, I was like, I do not like agree with Joe on most things he talks about. When he was talking about California, I was like, no, I get you. That's exactly right. You're right.
Yeah. And it's like really interesting for him because it's like invasive in a way where like he's not used to people breaking his privacy.
Yeah.
He's used to doing that to other people. So I just thought it was like a really fun inverse for him to be in California where there's cameras on every street, where
Uh-huh.
people are like accessing like his life in a way that he doesn't feel comfortable with, and how much he dislikes it. So it's
Yeah.
just like, dude, what do you think you're doing? And it's like he has no self-awareness at any point ever or any sort of, so it's like he doesn't pick up on the fact that it's like a nice reflection back to like show him what he's been doing to people. But it's still interesting. I just thought it was like a fun thing that they did. It's just very different for him. But yeah, there's also something to be said about the way that they showcase their like descent into hysteria that they do in the show and possibly in the books. The more murders that take place, uh, the more unhinged that they get, and it's like kind of
Yeah.
cool to see that happen. It reminds me of like the way that the Last of Us 2 video game did it, but with like far better pacing. We
Mm.
watch Joe and Love unravel more and more over time as their makeshift version of normal literally burns to the ground, and we also see them like lose touch, fumbling to maintain control through their experience. And this descent makes the story feel even more authentic because after each murder they lose a little bit more of their grip on like the situation in reality, because it
Mhm.
shouldn't be this easy to murder a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So it's good that they show like after you murdered one person there's going to be like a whole chain of events that takes place that's going to derail you. But you
Mhm.
really
It's
like see Joe and Love like kind of like lose it
yeah.
a
It's
bit.
like the little lady who swallowed the fly,
Yeah.
and then she has to, like, swallow something else, and then swallow something else. That's them for
Yeah.
murder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what was fun about this season is it did give a little bit more like context for his childhood, and I really enjoyed that because you get like a clear glimpse of like how Joe established his logic and thought processes. So you get like context for the voice in his head, and just like how we got here. And like the how doesn't matter so much, or neither does the why. It's just more so like it's interesting because then also it's like you recognize that these are traumas that impact people, and maybe we should take care of children more. But
Mhm.
yeah, we see a clear glimpse into Joe's logic when he's a child in episode 10. And in this episode, we see Kid Joe as he's talking to like one of his only friends at the group home, Polly, as they're looking at Nurse Fiona's office while it's being cleared out. And then Kid Joe says, "It was her boyfriend. I could have stopped him. The last time it ruined my entire life." Paulie says back to him, "You mean like with your mom?" And then Kid Joe says, "It made her hate me so much. She put me here. So I thought with Fiona, I didn't want her to hate me too." And Paulie responds, "For the record, you don't know how your mom feels. You're making it up. And hey, trust me, I do it too. But I'll never actually know why mine left me here. And neither will you." And what's
Mhm.
very interesting about that last sentence for me is that we clearly see that Joe struggles with understanding the intentions of others, that he struggles to empathize with his friends' shared feeling of abandonment. We see like him kind of like process that information. And to me, that statement brought his inner voice into context because in misunderstanding others and their intentions, he has taught himself to speak on their behalf.
Mhm.
He was never given the closure from his mom. You know, his inner voice is him guessing and rationalizing these choices and the actions of other people without giving them the chance to answer those questions themselves. And in fact, throughout the show, we see him continue to be wrong almost every time he makes an assumption, but he has accepted that he would never actually know the answer to why. So he stops listening or caring about what actual other people's thoughts are in an authentic way. He just creates this world in which he lives and is the protagonist of, and grips to that because that's the only thing that makes it so he can like do stuff. And Joe as a child in these scenes is defining his logic that carries him into adulthood, specifically with the death of Fiona. uh, with Fiona, he was trying to learn from his mistakes he experienced with his mom, but in not murdering her boyfriend, uh, he essentially like he hesitates with Fiona in a way he didn't with his mom. When his mom was like getting attacked by his dad, he didn't hesitate. He shot him. With
Mhm.
Fiona, he was like, "My mom left me here because of that. I'm not going to act on this." He had the opportunity to push her boyfriend down the steps, and he was like, "Nah." But as a result, Fiona ends up going missing and is realistically probably murdered by her boyfriend. So this kind of rationalizes for him, even though incorrect, that this situation was necessary to have murder happen. If he murdered Fiona's boyfriend while he had the chance, she'd still be alive. And this combined with this like anxious attachment style and this compulsion for control pulls Joe out of this exclusively hiding and watching state into action. So instead of like before, he was like hiding in the closet. He was like, I'm not going to do nothing. I'm just going to watch it happen and be sad.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Fiona, he realized like, I can't hide in the closet. I have to go murder somebody. Cause like if I murder them, then they'd still be here. They probably will hate me, but that's fine because they'll still be alive. And it's like, that's how he sees it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how he
Yeah.
logics himself into being the hero. Because to him, he's like, I'm doing them a favor. I could have helped Fiona, but I didn't because I hesitated. So murder is the only way. And that's how he sees it. And it's like awful because like kid him didn't have to end up that way. It is what it is. There's lots of people who experience a lot of trauma, come out of it, and they don't become murderers.
Yeah.
You know,
Most.
the majority just end up being like regular people with like that cry a lot or like have irrationally emotional responses to things, or they just get therapy and they have great lives. I don't know. You know, everyone figures it out in their own way, but he made the active choice to murder people. And that's the problem. And it's sad because he didn't have to be that way, but
yeah,
he really never had a person that protected him. And that's where it's a bummer.
Yeah, I had one more point I was thinking when you were talking about love and how she like, was able to assimilate and kind of easier kind of get into that role. But there's also like this whole thing of like white woman victimhood too that she plays into, because the way that the young neighbor assumed that Joe was the problem and that Joe did everything wrong and she needed to be rescued when in fact she was the one who did the murder. It like adds to that because she's never really like, no, it's not him. She never does that. She's like, yes, of course, save me. And she is always playing that victim card. That really comes very easy for her. And that's why like
she activates white woman tears like that all the time.
She's very good. She's such a great actress. And that's why I think like it's so interesting having Marianne, because something about Marianne's character too is that like one, she's a person of color. Two, she came from a similar background to Joe. So she sees him. Like she's one of the only characters who will say like, where did you go? Like she notices when he gets lost in his brain and he's doing his weird using stuff, and she's just like, where did you go just now? Or like, hey, or like she like tries to snap him back. She sees him, and when she sees like something ain't right, she's like, nope, I'm leaving that. No, I am not the one. And I think that's like really
for sure.
So
I know what you're talking about. Like when Love's talking to her and she's like, oh yeah, okay, I believe you wholeheartedly. He is a threat. You're right. I'm gonna go take my kid and go somewhere else.
Like
she did not need any convincing, and she also was like, "All right, yeah, no, I have a tendency to try to find people that remind me of my childhood. It's fine. Yeah, he's a problem. I accept that. Goodbye forever.
Say less.
Yeah. Because she's not risking it. Absolutely not.
She's so good. Like even she has like, there's a conversation with like Love where he could have gotten caught because she like makes this remark about how like Joe has had to work late, and Marianne's like, yeah, well, I'm dating this new guy and we're in this like honeymoon phase, and so he's been taking, like, she's very quick to be like, I know she's gonna be stressed, let me alleviate this.
It's not because we're cheating.
So good. She's so good. She's the best character always. She steals every show. That's why the only bearable reason to watch the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is to see her. So, and I mean, everyone's really good in this season. But of course, I was like, as soon as I saw her, I was like, oh yes.
Yeah.
And she's just so quick to be like this voice of reason that critiques the entirety of the show, like entirety of like the narratives that we've been buying into for seasons, where she's just like,
well, she's like, if she had a similar upbringing to Joe and that she's experienced a lot of trauma, she's not out there murdering people.
No, she's not. No,
she's like, there's a different
self-harmed.
Yeah. So wild. Yeah. No, she's like a really great, like catalyst for him. And that she's also seen some stuff and is like not out there murdering people. He didn't have to turn out this way, and he made a choice, and his choice was bad. And that's why he's a bad person.
Yeah. And she's like, say less.
Yeah.
Bye. Cody.
I'm anxious for next season though, because I'm like sad that he followed her. I want better for her. I do not want them to be together, and I hope she murders him, but like in a way that's like self-defense, like, and like she lives her life, and then he's finally done, or like she's the one who gets him arrested or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she finally ends him. What a nice
Yeah.
time that would be. And now I haven't read the third one, but I'm gonna. I now it's on my list.
Was
And
Marianne in the second one?
no,
No.
no,
Okay.
it's just love. And in it, like they she gets pregnant, they get married, and it's all because like he doesn't the whole thing was like he's going to jail, and so her family money is going to get him out. Like they get him the best lawyer,
Oh.
tie into him, and then she like abandons him in the end, and he
Oh,
has
that's
to sit
good.
there and be like, oh, you know, um, yeah.
Yeah. That's a
It,
good ending. Well, not that he got her out. Why would she get him out then?
because he's the father of her child.
Oh, okay.
And because
Well,
she was one dimensional, so she was
yeah.
like, "Oh, I have to protect the boy." It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
His favorite place on the planet.
Oh my
So
goodness.
good. So highly, highly recommend the books and the seasons of the show. I also recommend just looking up some videos and clips of Penn like totally just
Talking about.
dissing
Yeah.
dissing him because that's very fun too.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have two more episodes left of our Tainted Love series, and then we're moving on to something new. But please
Yep.
let us know what you think about you. If you read the books, what do you think? If there's something similar, I'm not aware of anything that's like this critical to true crime in this way. But if you
Yeah.
know of something, let us know, or just let us know your thoughts. If yeah, and any resources of like, what do you do if you have a stalker? That's also helpful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, be safe out there, especially people who are still dating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
Or
hard.
even not. Even if you're not dating.
Yeah,
Like
he was after people who were in relationships. You're so right. Yeah, just be
yeah.
safe out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Don't trust even the average of Joes. Uh
Yeah, because he's just a regular looking dude. All
dangerous.
the always anyone comes near you, you're like, nah, please go away. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in friendship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
it's good for illness prevention too. Pandemic rules forever.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at.
6 feet. 6 feet. Thank you over there.
Yeah,
Thank you. For sure. Cool. Well, don't get married.
delete your kids.
Or that's the only reason they keep you alive. And honestly, girl, you gotta think about it. Okay? If that's the reason, I come on.
Yeah,
Come on.
run.
Yeah, run. And I love.
Yeah, maybe we'll get another season for her, like a new
Show?
spinoff. Yeah, new show, but that just about love.
Like in the past?
Yeah, yeah. yes, Gabe.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, wait.
I saw the end. I know.
But yeah, watch anything she's in. Everyone go watch Haunting of Bly Manor. And like, she's in something else that I saw. Anyway, do that. Okay,
Cool.
bye.